now we are going to get into your story. So tell us about your childhood up until 91 when you entered the Air Force.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, kind of a little bit of a rough childhood. My parents were divorced pretty early. My mom was a bad alcoholic. She loved us though, so I don't want to make this sound like, she didn't care. She really did love us. She was just, that disease just ravaged her. It really took her soul. And, she got remarried after my parents got divorced, and she married another alcoholic. And so, and my mom had custody of my brother and I as well. And so we spent most of our, those really influential years with her and my, stepdad, who was, like I said, a pretty bad alcoholic himself. And it was tough. They were almost every night. I mean, they were drunk or, fighting, and at times it would get, physical, and you're young and you have to watch that. And there's a reason, twins are already close, but my brother and I, just kind of protected each other and cared for each other and entertained each other when we needed to. And so, it was rough, growing up as a kid. My dad, after my mom and dad got divorced, he remarried a wonderful lady, and they're amazing. They're still married to this day. And he's a hardworking plumber. He was a plumber for 40 years. He worked his tail off. And like I said, he loved us. It's just, we weren't there most of the time. And so we spent a lot of time in the family. And my mom's side of the family is just so much alcohol. Early in my years, we would go to Thanksgivings, kind of a family reunion type thing that we still do to this day. And there'd be more and more alcohol. Both of her brothers died of alcohol. So literally cirrhosis. So, passed away in their sleep at night from liver failure. Her dad, my grandfather, did as well. He was an alcoholic and had a reaction. He was taking heart medication and drank too much one night, had a reaction, had a heart attack, and died in the bathroom. And so, addiction and alcohol, even my little stepsister passed away at 32 of an overdose.
Oh my gosh.
Just lots of alcohol, and it was a struggle. I would say I had a terrible childhood, but there was a lot of struggle, right? There wasn't a lot of adult influence in our life. So it was a pickup game. We would literally, do what we wanted to do when we wanted to do it. And then occasionally we would have some structure and we would fall back in line.
Yeah.
And then we would go do what we want to do. But, then I met this wonderful lady, though, this wonderful young lady at the time, Donna, and she was going through a lot of similar type of issues in her household. I won't go into a bunch of details. I'll let her tell that story, but she had a rough as well, living with her stepdad, and her brothers had literally lit her hair on fire. And I mean, just some really bad stuff done to her. And so, we kind of connected on that level. And, we learned early on that we would take care of each other. And like I said, I had just graduated high school, and we found out Donna was pregnant. She was going into her junior year of high school. And in the pregnancy, we were told that our daughter was going to have spina bifida and be mentally challenged. And so my girlfriend at the time, Donna, she quit school. We got married, shortly after that. And because I called my dad, and I was at a 7-Eleven, and he said, "You know what to do." And I said, "Yep, I'm going to take care of this young lady and our daughter." And so we got married, and then, our daughter was born a few months later. By the grace of God, she was perfectly normal with no effects whatsoever. And I literally, there's been so many blessings in our life, but I think that was the first great blessing in our life, is that, our daughter was born, and she's perfectly happy, healthy young lady today. So, and I was working at Home Depot at the time and doing pretty well, actually, as a 18-year-old. But I was also living with my twin brother that I mentioned earlier, and he came home and said, "Hey, I'm going in the Air Force." And I said, "Well, why didn't I think of that?" Because my grandfather had served in World War II in Korea, and my uncle was was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam, and my aunt was a hospital commander. And I'm like, well, duh, why don't I go in the Air Force? Great benefits for my family. And so, in the fall of 1990, so we're just starting the Gulf War. We both went into a recruiter's office, and on 8 March 1991, we flew off to basic training. So, and another, for the second probably great blessing in our life.
Yeah. So
But yeah,
that's incredible to see where you are today, especially, going through everything in your childhood. And most kids, go through something like that where, most just have a divorced uh, set of parents, and it's tough on them. But you add in the alcohol and everything else that you were talking about. What was your mindset like when you joined the Air Force in fall of 90, early 91?
yeah, I think well, it's two things. I think number one, it was just take care of the family. I
Mhm.
needed a future. I needed something I could see. I needed structure. Remember, I had very little structure. Everything I had done up to that point was basically whatever I wanted it to be. So the only reason why I got good grades is because I convinced myself it was probably good for me to get good grades because there's
Yeah.
really no oversight. But so the structure in the military and really, knowing I would be able to take care of my family was a huge relief. And like I said, the second thing was I could see something in the future, right? There was a future out there. Maybe there was a future in Home Depot, but you just never knew, right? It was just a job. It really wasn't a career, and that's nothing against Home Depot. In fact, I absolutely loved working there. If it wasn't for my brother coming home and saying he was going to the Air Force, I might be some crazy regional manager, or maybe I'm running Home Depot right now. Who
Yeah.
knows?
CEO.
Yeah, maybe. I
CEO.
don't know. I mean, I never limited myself, so it's possible. But I could absolutely see a future because I could see what my grandfather did, and I could see what
Yeah.
my uncle did. They both had successful or fairly successful careers in the military, so I knew there was something there for me. But I'll tell you, I didn't go in right away with the success mindset. I didn't go in thinking
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the absolute best at this I possibly can. Though I will say, I grew up playing sports. I've been an athlete my entire life, and I remember sitting in basic training. When you got your 300 people in that room, and they're telling us about enlisted force structure and all this, and you got that snarky buck sergeant in my case up there saying, you know what, there's 300 people in here and only 1% of you have the potential, only 1% will be a chief, but 60% of you are going to get out before 12 years of service
Yep.
anyway. So don't even worry about it. None of you are going to be a chief. And I literally, I went to clothing sales that afternoon. I bought a metal chief stripe. And I said, watch me. Don't, it's 4th and 10. You're not going to stop
Challenge
me from
accepted.
getting that right. You're not going to stop me. You don't know. Apparently, you don't know who I am. And it was total arrogance.
Yeah.
More than anything else, it was total arrogance. It was the 18, 19-year-old mindset, like, who do you think you are kind of thing. But I will say that kind of mentality served me well in my career too. By the way, I kept those chief stripes all the way up until I made chief. I pound them in the dashboard of my car. When the prongs broke and all the glue, wore off, I taped them to the mirror in my bathroom, and until there was no more, color on them, they were just a shiny metal piece
Just an outline.
of outline of stripes, right, with nothing on it. But 20 years later, it happened, and I ended up giving those things away to somebody else I believed in and told them, hey, it's your turn, right? So,
That's
but
awesome.
but I kept those as a reminder of that person that told me I couldn't do something way back in basic training. So pretty cool story, actually.
Well, you mentioned you played sports, but how was it from going from a very unstructured lifestyle to you get to BMT and there's really not a whole lot of room for adjustment? It's like day one structure based. How was that adjustment for you?
Yeah, I think it was welcome for me. I know for a lot of people that's a really difficult transition, but
Hmm.
for me, it helped me kind of stay focused. I didn't no longer had to worry about, how am I going to do something? When am I going to do something? Who's in charge here? Right? None of that stuff mattered because all of a sudden it fell into place. Now, of
Hmm.
course, somebody screaming at you, that's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but I think in general, that structure was something that I really needed, right? In
Yeah.
fact, my transition out of the military, has been a challenge in some of those same ways, right? All that structure and discipline, those things that you were just giving to you, the government, the military, the Air Force gave that to me. I didn't have to worry about doing that. The next thing was always there for me. In retirement, you have to create all that all over again. And so
Yeah.
that I think having that structure and that discipline and was really beneficial for us. We really needed it. Besides all of the camaraderie and family and all those things that we also needed as very young, single or very young parents with a very young child, and not really knowing and understanding how to do that, how to be a husband, how to be a wife, how to be a father or mother. So there was so much learning that had to happen in our relationship, and you're learning to be an airman, you're learning your career. I can't imagine not really having that at that age, given my upbringing. So for
Yeah.
me, it was welcomed. In fact, I really thrived pretty quickly. I made some mistakes early, but I thrived pretty quickly in that environment. And it just really became easy.
Yeah. And you came in, you said 1991, electronic computer, cryptographic systems, journeyman,
Right.
basically the comm background.
Yeah, say that 3 times fast, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I came in like cyber operations,
Yeah,
technician, which was a lot easier.
right, right, right.
But then I thought this was pretty interesting. So one of the big moments in a young airman's career, especially for those non-military folks listening, is attending airman leadership school,
Yeah,
and which is basically your first exposure to the world of supervising, because at that point you've just been a technician. But you attend airman leadership school at Langley in Virginia, which I'm good friends with the current commandant there right now and the cadre. But you weren't assigned to Langley, correct?
no, I was not. I was stationed at Keflavik Naval Air Station in Iceland at the time. Yep.
So this is what I was talking about before we came on there. How in the world did that happen? How did you go from Iceland to Langley?
All right, let me break it down to you, young man. No. So believe it or not, at the time, ALS was an in residence course. You went, to the school and stayed just like we do at the Senior NCO Academy
Yeah, yeah.
today. You went to the school. They had dorms in the school, and you stayed in the school. So just like we do for NCO Academy now, you go TDY. That's exactly what happened to me. They didn't have an airman leadership school, obviously up on the Navy base up there. So they sent us down. There were actually 4 of us, me and then 3 from Diego Garcia, and that were TDY in that class, and the rest of them were at Langley. But yeah, so they didn't have a school, and so we PCS or TDY went TDY down to Langley to attend Airman Leadership School, and slept in the dorms at ALS.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
know, right?
Well, to me,
You're like,
I'm
what?
like, I know Pitzenbarger was around at Spangdahlem like in '88. So I'm surprised they just didn't send you down to Germany.
Yeah, no. I mean, there was like 3 options, I think, at the time when you were leaving Keflavik to go to ALS, but the rotator flew in and out from Langley at the time too, and later when moved to Baltimore, but at the time it was going out of Langley, so it was just as easy to jump on the rotator, go down to
Yeah.
Langley, go to school and then fly right back. But
Okay. And
yeah,
you didn't leave empty handed. You walked away with a Levito award. And actually, I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, all 4 levels of PME, you walked
yeah,
away with some sort of recognition.
yeah. Listen, I am have always been about education and
Mm-hmm.
development. And so that's my wheelhouse. I really, really thrive, except at ALS, I passed out at my first speech. So the fact that I won, I
Really?
literally couldn't hit the ground, right? So the fact that I won ALS is an absolute miracle, or Levito at ALS, absolute miracle, because I was out cold.
It boosts your instructor points. At least instructors will be like, he
Yeah,
really cares about it.
I told him that was my intro to speaking, because I'd never stood in front of anybody before. So, and then I made the excuse that it was my attention getter, and then I had everybody's attention. Now I'm ready. But
You get
yeah,
up with like a red mark on your head and you're like, is that no,
yeah,
it's just my attention step.
yeah, that's right. Everybody's with me now, right?
I've seen somebody vomit, and then I had someone who went, they were about 15 seconds in. They were like, hello, I am Trip Bodenheimer, and today I am I can't do this. And they walked out. They just walked right out of the room. And I was like, I was training someone at that time, and I was like, so that's going to be a no-go. They're going to have to refire. So yeah, you spent some time in the communications field. You, like you said, the one of these doesn't really fit in with the other. Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, and then you went to Alaska.
Yeah, a little cold.
It's a little change of, you don't have the humidity there. But then from there, this is the part that really intrigues me, you know, being a first sergeant. You were a first sergeant for 6 different squadrons. What did that do for your career, that experience of jumping around, getting outside of just comm?
It's a game changer trip, honestly. I mean, I loved being in comm. I did some real cool stuff. 2000 presidential election. I was the first and only 2E2 at the time to ever do that job, and it was just very honored to be able to be a part of that. You know, it was obviously very historical. I met some great folks, but you know, putting that diamond on, really, in my little bio I sent you, right? I told you I'm passion. I'm looking for my passion, always looking for passion, and that right there was a passion, right? That was a passion move. I didn't know it, honestly. People just said, hey, you know, why don't you try something? And I thought, hey, it's been 15, 16 years. I've been in comm. Let's try something a little different. I'm game. This whole first sergeant thing looks pretty cool. Yeah. So, but I got to tell you, it's the best move I ever made in my Air Force career. I absolutely love being a first sergeant. You know, we talked about that whole leadership, you know, definition, what it means, and influencing people, and the opportunity I had to help mentor, shape, guide, you know, develop folks in that position. Was just fascinating. I mean, I just really, really enjoyed it. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
You know, how it really felt to be in that position, and it had nothing to do with power or, you know, just to be able to influence, but the fact that I could help people every day, and be in so many different mission sets in our Air Force and see such a different environment and different cultures and every little subset of communities that I went to, be able to experience a completely different organization, but they're only a mile apart on the same installation. You know, I just really, really enjoy being a first sergeant. And as a matter of fact, I made senior in chief as a first sergeant, and I'll never forget, I got notified that I made chief. It was November 4th because it was Donna and I's anniversary too. So I got promoted and it was our anniversary.
What a good day.
I know. Awesome day, right? I found out I made chief, and my wife and I think we were celebrating, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. It was a big one, right? And so, but Rob Frank was the career field manager at the time, and he called me on the day that I made it on my anniversary and said, "Wow, man, fantastic. By the way, you gotta leave. You can't stay here, man. You only got 4.5 years as a diamond. I got all these dudes out here with, you know, a lot longer time. And oh, by the way, we're cutting the chief first sergeant billets in the Air Force from 26 to 9. And so I love you, but you can't stay. See you later."
Wow.
So it was my exit out of just as fast as I went in, I went out too. But it worked out for the better, man. And that's the reason why I ended up really deciding I wanted to be a command chief, because I think, you know, they're so closely related. It's just kind of the next level, right? A little higher level of experience, and, you know, a little higher level of the job, but otherwise it's very similar type of thing. Your job is, you know, helping around welfare, and that's really what a first sergeant does as well. So it worked out perfect.
What was the biggest thing you learned about yourself through your experience as a first sergeant?
Wow, that's deep. I learned so much. I mean, we could spend hours talking about all of the lessons learned. I'll tell you that I think the big lessons I learned is, you know, never judge a book by its cover. And that sounds a little cliche, but people have so many things going on, right? And good and bad, and they have different upbringings. I mean, different upbringings. There's so many influencing factors. I know, you know, there were times I'd have somebody across from me at the desk, and if I walked into the halls of the unit, I would hear, you know, just the grumblings of this person and who they are, and the rumor mill would be flying, and And then you get them across the desk and you find out it's not that at all, right? That life dealt them a pretty crappy deck of cards, man. And although they may not have managed it very well, boy, they sure weren't given a whole lot to work with. And if they had the right leaders, the right, people around them who cared, who poured into them, who did for me what some other folks had done early in my career, maybe they wouldn't have been in this position. It doesn't mean that we don't hold them accountable or they're not responsible for their actions, but they're not bad people, right? And sometimes they just needed a little help and they didn't get it and they made some mistakes. And so, that book isn't always what it looks like on the cover, and you got to get to know people and understand. And I think intent matters, right? And sometimes we don't realize that. And so I think that's one, major lesson I learned is you got to listen to the story, right? Read the book and don't just look at the cover and make judgments. Because I met some folks who went through some really tough times, made some pretty poor decisions, but if once they got the right people in their circle and they started feeling respected and rewarded and they made some good decisions, they just turned around and became fantastic airmen and fathers and mothers. And it really is a satisfying thing to watch somebody go from broken and nothing to fulfilled and successful. In fact, I think it's the greatest thing on the planet, actually, is to see somebody broken and unfulfilled to being, happy and successful is probably the greatest thing we'll ever see. And I got to see that every single day as a first sergeant. And I tell you, I went home tired because the days were long. I have one weekend off in a whole year in Security Forces Squadron. And
jeez.
But I tell you, it might have been the best gig I ever had,
Mm-hmm.
So just a lot of challenges, but just heartwarming, knowing that you go home every night with those experiences, just so grateful to be able to do that. So Joe Bass, if you need a old retired first sergeant, come back.
Yeah. No, I heard someone told me, I heard a quote, plant the seed, but don't stay there and bask in the shade, let the tree grow. But sometimes it just takes somebody to plant that seed for them. And, whether it's a first sergeant or a supervisor, a lot of times I've seen people come through Airman Leadership School or even this course. And you mentioned like, hey, who's that mentor or great leader you've had? And a lot of times it's a good question. But when you ask them about the bad ones, they've got names ready to go. And it's unfortunate, but just buying into people.
Yeah. I mean, I got real lucky real early. I had a chief, Jimmy Jones. I'll never forget that guy. I misused my government travel card. This was right when it first came out. I mean, literally in the early 90s. Yeah. Here I am, man.
Got you some sneakers or something.
No. I didn't have any money left, so I went and got some gas in the car, right? So it was a bad decision, poor decision. Yeah. I didn't have any money and I made a rash decision. I got to get to work, so I'll just go put $20 in the car, right? But I'll never forget, he pulled me in his office and he said, listen, this ends right here, but you get one choice, right? One mistake. But that mistake won't matter as of today, right? You get a pass on this.
Yeah.
And at the time they were being so hard on those that did it because they wanted to send a message, right? You will not abuse the card. And so they were doing Article 15s left and right for people who use the card, right? And so, he sent me a message really clear that there's a standard and we're going to adhere to the standard, but you're bigger and better than that, right? And so we're going to give you an opportunity to prove yourself again. So, and that meant so much for me as a young airman. It ruined my chances for senior airmen below the zone, but at the end of the day, they didn't take a stride. They didn't take money from my family, and they absolutely could have and been justified in doing that. So the fact that they said they had faith in me, right, it really meant a lot. So I've seen young airmen, my son, as a matter of fact, go through the first 4 years of his career and really struggle without some good leadership, or one-on-one leadership.
Mm.
in an organization to really help shape what that looks like. And it's tough for folks, right? And I think it's really important that they get it.
Yeah, BTZ part didn't hinder you too bad. You ended up being pretty successful from that.
Yeah, dang
Yeah,
it, cost me a little bit, but that's all right. I learned a
that's
great
me.
lesson.
I always think I'm like, I've had a good career, but I always go back. I'm like, I didn't win BTZ.
Yeah,
And I
well,
just set me back like 6 months or something. But
yeah.
so talk to us now about your time over at the Pentagon.
Yeah, an interesting place to work.
Yeah,
I tell you that I wish every airman in our Air Force could spend a week in the Pentagon. I really
really.
do. Yeah, these are such great folks that work up there, man. But the hurdles that they have to get over every day are just monumental. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so much. We talk about a lot about the bureaucracy of our Air Force,
Yeah,
and it does. Let's face it, right? It just does. There's bureaucracy in what we do, but the reality of it is that in that arena, you almost can't avoid it. It almost has to happen, right?
yeah,
You got civilian control of the military, and so there's so much push and pull going on out there to make sure everybody with great intentions, right, to make sure that it meets the intent of law, or make sure that it's going to be the right thing for 550,000 people with completely different mission sets, in a global organization. There's a lot of definitions of what that might look like. And so it's a really tough environment, especially for younger. We have staff sergeants working in that building, which, by the way, I advocate against if I can prevent it, just
really.
financially.
Yeah,
I mean, I was a chief and paying $500-600 over my BAH every month to live in what I call substandard place, 1,200 square foot. It hasn't been changed since the 60s. Really
yeah,
just tough conditions. So for a young staff sergeant, financially so difficult. They have to make a 1 to 2 hour commute to be able to afford
traffic.
just quality housing. Yeah, traffic's
Ugh.
outrageous, but I'll tell you, like I said, that there are a lot of great people working really hard up there with some challenges that most airmen just don't understand. It's easy to look up at the Pentagon and go, why can't they figure this out, right? Why is it
PT and
so
all this other
difficult?
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, why is it so hard, right? Why does it take so long? But you spend just a few days in that building and you start to realize, wow, it's not as easy as it sounds, and things
yeah,
aren't as simple as they seem. No matter how much we try and rationalize, boy, it would just be easy to just write the policy and then send it out. And I have so many examples. I mean, I remember when Chief Wright came to me, when we changed from the ABUs to OCPs, you could cuff the sleeves on the ABUs, right? Just roll
yeah.
it under here. And Chief Wright likes to roll his cuff sleeves under, and so he said, "Hey, Craig, just go right. We forgot to transcribe it when we moved the new policy for the OCP. So just go put it in there. Do what you do, right? As the A1 senior enlisted leader." And so I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to go to the uniform team. We're just going to write this memo. We'll send it to the field. This thing will be changed tomorrow." Mm-mm. It took 6 months.
Oh,
6 months and General Kelly was forthright with me. He said, "Listen, if it comes to assignments and uniform policy, we just don't write it, Chief. No matter if we have it in the policy today and we're rewriting the policy, that thing has to be staffed through the entire A directorate and all 4-star generals in the Air Force. And then, things happen and cuffing sleeves don't become a priority, right? When it gets to the 4-stars office, the O6 is like, anyways."
yeah,
And so it just takes time, and that's an unfortunate part of the bureaucracy, a little bit of what we do. But the reality of it is the intention's there, right? People believe in the process. They love our airmen. They're doing everything they can to take care of them. It's just they're dealing, with a situation that's really, really tough. But I wouldn't change it. I absolutely loved my time up there. Again, I think every airman, if they had an opportunity, should get to spend a little bit of time up there. I mean, that's our headquarters, right?
yeah.
That's where our policy and standards, guidelines, our ethos, our values, that's where it all comes from. Of course, with influence and input from the field, but that's where it all comes from. and that's fed by Congress and our president,
Yeah.
as our leader of of the military. And so, very fascinating place to work for sure.
And that's really good insight for everybody who's like, why can't the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force or everybody else make these changes tomorrow?
Yeah.
To know that it's not that easy. It's not you throw it in a toaster and it's ready in a minute and a half. So
Yeah, there's just so many things. I mean, when you
yeah.
have a lot of it rolls through AFPC too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the poor folks at AFPC are the ones that have to implement the policy that's made at the
Oh,
Pentagon.
they get a
And
bad rap too from people.
they do. I mean, if people knew, and don't quote me on this, I think it's 176 IT systems that we manage for our, we'll call them HR programs
Yeah.
for the Air Force, right? And very few of those systems actually communicate with each other. So there's a lot of, we have to take it out of here, put it in there, and it has to be translated, and we have to do things differently. And as the
This
AFI then,
network to this network. Yeah.
right, and then as the AFI need updated, and it's just so many
Yeah.
things. Now we're in the middle of the IT modernization. At least when I left a year ago, we should be getting close. That's going to reduce that number drastically, and many of those will be able to communicate. And in theory, it'll create a much better system. But it's still an issue, right? Where you can't just say, well, we want to do this with joint spousal. Let's just update their code. We can't just update their code, right? I wish it was that easy. If it were that easy to update the code, then we could just go do it. But we can't update the code. It's kind of an example, but. There were a lot of challenges that we would face because we couldn't make the changes because of IT systems down at AFPC when we wanted to as part of the policy. So again, just that's one of many examples. There's 100 others that we could use to kind of make the point that it's difficult, and the leaders are getting after those kinds of things. And I have faith that it will continue to get better.
So talk to us now about your role in standing up the Space Force, which is still in its infancy stage.
Yeah, I have a lot of love for the space. Obviously, I was here at Patrick from 2012 to 2015. I was first the AFTAC superintendent, but I was exposed to obviously the launch here, the launch range here, as soon as we got here. And then in 2014 became the actual command chief at the 45th Space Wing. And so for me, my personality, I love being on the edge of new things. I love innovation. I've always been that way. I'm not a creative guy. I'm not that side of the brain thinker necessarily. Although I like to participate in those things. I really think it's the growth portion of it for me, right? So space is, since I've been in it, 2014, has really been pushing the envelope of what's possible. And then when I left here in the launch business and went out to 14th Air Force, and for those who don't know, they were responsible for all space operations globally for the then Air Force Space Command. You get the whole picture and not just the launch side of the house. And again, you're taking kind of an outdated model of what space could look like and transitioning it to a warfighting domain, so kind of like we did cyber, 5 to 10 years earlier. We were in that same phase. When China shot down their weather satellite, and don't quote me again, I used to know all this stuff because I used to talk about it all the time, but I think it was 2007. We were put on notice that space was no longer a domain that was safe, at any time we could potentially lose a GPS satellite or another asset in orbit. And so we were in a race, just like we were in a race to land on the moon. We were in a race to protect, the space domain. And so my whole time in the space organization was this massive thrust, for lack of a better word, right? Moving the organization forward. And towards the end, we'd stood down the warfighting organization, moved it to Stratcom, and there was a lot of churn in what that might look like. We created a new ops center out in Colorado Springs, and then President Trump announced that we would stand up the Space Force, and this was towards the end of my tour at 14th Air Force, but we'd already been moving kind of in a direction that would have led us to that point anyway. So a lot of the programs and processes that we had stood up in that, transition or that thrust forward were perfect for what we would do to transition to the Space Force. Now, there was still a lot of work to be done. In fact, when I transitioned to the Pentagon and I was working a little bit with what would the personnel programs look like, it was an even bigger transition, because now we're not just talking about a space domain and protecting the space domain, a potential warfighting domain. Now we're talking about, well, how do you man it, right? What does recruiting look like, and so, which is a completely different set of obstacles to get over. And I will say that they've hired the right people. The Amber Mitchells and Toby, Chief Toberman. He is one of the most brilliant thinkers I've ever been around. Just I don't know what the guy's IQ score is, but it's off the charts. I guarantee. He's super smart.
I've heard him speak before. Yeah,
he thinks way faster than I do. So sometimes he has to say something and I have to get back to him like 3 days later while I process what he just said. But he's an innovator too. He likes to push the boundaries again. And I think when you're creating a separate service, that's exactly what you should be doing. You should be thinking differently. And in fact, I think he's been probably held back a little bit because it's still the military, and the military has, this still has this control, these things by law that it can and can't do. And so I think, he's probably been constricted a little bit on some of the things he'd like to do, but they're really doing some really cool stuff, and it continues to evolve every day. And I know, they'll be continuing to make the changes for probably another 5 or 10 years, really to flush out a lot of this. The good news is the Air Force we have a lot of lessons learned, believe it or not, from 70 plus years ago when the transition happened. And so, we could look back at that and know, hey, let's don't go this direction, or let's go this direction. And so they have the right people. General Raymond's brilliant. The whole team, General Whiting, who was my boss, is still out there at the Spock, and Chief Bentavania, a good friend of mine, is a senior enlisted leader out there. He's phenomenal, career space guy. He knows that business better, or as well as anybody else, and I could go on and on. Deanna Burr, Rock Miller. I mean, these are professionals, and I mean, high caliber professionals. They're in great hands, and I know they're going to be super successful.
Yeah, and that's really cool that you were kind of there for ground up, like the kind of the planning phase, watching it kind of take off. And then you went into, you retired and you transitioned into some other projects that you're currently working with. And we'll kind of go through these one at a time, but talk to us about Aligned Education Foundation.
Yeah, real quick before I get to that, I want you to know that I have one of the original drawings of what the Space Force might look like that we actually, pen and ink in there. Yeah, and that thing's going to go in an auction, 60 years from now.
Okay, well that answers one of my questions.
It goes into a museum or something, but it is super cool. I mean,
you have to send me a picture of that.
Yeah, it doesn't look like anything like that today, but it is pretty cool how, kind of the bar napkin.
That's what I was going to say, like the napkin from the rusty pool stick, and you're right.
That's right. Yeah, that ended up becoming the United States Space Force. So it's really cool that, I was able to get my
I had to see a picture of that. I have to check that out.
It's pretty awesome, actually. It's pretty awesome. But anyway, Aligned Education Foundation. So it's such a great story. When I retired, I knew that I wanted to work for, I wanted to do something I loved. Again, the passion follower. I loved being a first sergeant and a command chief because it was the opportunity to give back. Financially, my wife and I are good. She works 2 jobs. She's an Air Force civilian in a contracting squadron. She owns her own company, Arbonne, which is a health and nutrition company. And with my retirement, I mean, we're just comfortable. So I had a lot of space to be able to do whatever I really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so, I didn't rush into jobs. I was just kind of wondering what it might look like, figuring out, remember that lack of discipline that no longer exists, trying to write my future. I think for really the first time, I've actually had to use visualization, and no kidding, use visualization about what my future might look like. And so, I waited and waited and waited for opportunities. And I just happened to be in a group of, transitioning or prior transitioned senior leaders and email group. And and this thing came along that this organization was looking for some folks in Florida to educate folks on their VA home loan benefit. And I thought, that's pretty cool. I'm kind of interested, so let me reach out. And I reach out to the guy's name's Saint, and he's a retired command master chief in the Navy. And we had a couple conversations, and I was kind of lukewarm on it, to be honest with you. I wasn't real sure it was something I wanted to do. And then I found out that Julie Gudgel works out there. And for those who don't know, she's the retired AETC command chief and a good friend of mine. And so I called her, and she raved and raved about, Aligned and what they do. And I'm like, yeah, okay, kind of maybe a little warmer,
Yeah.
And then finally I agreed to fly out to San Antonio where they're headquartered. And Trip, I got to tell you, the second I walked in the doors of this facility, I knew this was it. I want to work for this place. The energy and the vibe in there is just unreal. Mike and I will get the opportunity to talk about Leadership Garage a little bit, but the business partner and I are really starting to hone in on culture as one of the things that we want to specialize in, and it's something we truly believe in, something we've been involved in our entire careers in the military. And then he's retired for 5 years now. He's worked several civilian jobs, so we got pretty good insight into what that looks like. But the culture in that organization was something I'd never experienced, and for a whole bunch of reasons. And so, but the primary reason was the two founders of this organization, Chris Cano and Tony Diaz, are prior enlisted guys, and their fathers, are military. And their heart for military members, veterans, and their families is it's unremarkable. I mean, it's remarkable. You can't walk by them without being so fired up about helping veterans. And they will tell you, there's 25 million veterans in this country, and only 15% of them have owned a piece of the land that they defend. And to them, that's a shame, right? That if these folks some of them have sacrificed more than we can ever imagine. Like Tony Diaz's dad, who died from a service-connected illness. I think he was 64 years old, and but never owned a house, never owned a piece of the land that he basically gave his life for. And these two guys are on a mission to change that. And the power, right, that they've just elicited in this process, I just instantly gravitated to it. And now I'm 100% bought in. I agree that 15% is not enough, and that more veterans, military members, veterans, and their families should own a piece of the land they defended. So these guys created the Aligned Education Foundation to go out and educate folks on their VA benefit. And I will say that I bought 2 houses in my 29 plus years in the military. And, we've been to all the briefings, even TAPS. I transitioned, obviously you have to go through TAPS, and they cover the VA home loan benefit a little bit. But in my 29 years and 4 months in the military, I learned about 30% of what I learned in the 1-hour brief they gave us when we were out there.
Wow.
And then I realized airmen need to know. Airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, Guardians, they need to know about their earned benefits. One of the most underutilized benefits they have. And that's our job, is to go out and change that. And so right now I'm on a mission to talk to as many people, train, educate as many people as I can on their earned benefit. If they choose not to use it at that point, that's fine. But I think if people realize what they can and can't do, who's eligible, when they can use it, can't use it, they'd be in a better position and a more educated position to make a financial decision for them and their families. And so that's what we're trying to do.
And if a listener's interested, where's a good contact to point them to?
Yeah, so right now you can go to alignedmortgage.com. The nonprofit was actually started by Tony Diaz. And by the way, Tony Diaz and Chris Cano actually own the mortgage company too, right? But we want to be very clear in saying that the foundation only does education. It's unbranded. We're not pushing any particular company. We don't push Aligned Mortgage because it's not about mortgages. It's about education, right? And so, but Chris and Tony started the company in 2017 with just a handful of people. So 2 prior enlisted guys and a couple of people with some mortgage experience. And today, in 2020, they did $2 billion worth of mortgage loans, and they have about 400 people in the organization. So not only are they a model of success, but the amount of money that they spend in the veterans community, the amount of time that they spend in the veteran community. I mean, they just opened up a new headquarters facility in San Antonio, and I think they're hiring 200 more people to come in work in that
Wow.
organization. And they vowed that 75 to 80% of those people that they bring in will be veterans or military family members of military members. And so
That's cool.
they're really working hard to take care of the veteran community. So for now, you can go to linemortgage.com. Actually, you can sign up for the briefs there as well. But eventually we're working on the nonprofit is pretty new. And so we'll eventually have a website for the nonprofit, and we'll start directing people to the nonprofit, because we don't want people to think that we're selling mortgages. We're not selling mortgages. In our briefing that we give, you will not see us sell anything about mortgages whatsoever. So in fact, and I work on behalf of the nonprofit. I don't work commissions or any of this stuff. So my job is simply to educate. So we want to make that very clear.
Okay. And we'll definitely have the link in the episode description, regardless of what platform you're listening to us on. Next, talk about Operation Motorsport.
Yeah, another wonderful organization. I tell you, I was very fortunate to be connected with Operation Motorsport. I've been a passionate motorsports guy, since I was young. My dad has been going to a car race and here in Sebring, Florida since 1968. He's never missed a year. And when we were 14 years old, my brother and I went for the first time. And even though, our love kind of started before that with Matchbox cars and all, crazy stuff with kids, when we went to that race, it was really solidified that the passion for motorsports. And probably in some ways, a little, outlandish. I've had 60 cars in my lifetime. That's probably more than most people have in 10 lifetimes, but I've had a lot of cars, and I really just love racing. And so I got out, and I actually was working. I got hooked up with the Commit Foundation. If you guys don't know about Commit Foundation, another wonderful nonprofit that helps military members transition. They originally were started to help the special warfare community transition, because obviously that can be a tough transition for folks in that community. Not a lot of jobs on the outside need people to blow things up and kill people, right? So it was originally started to help them, and very successful, and they've kind of branched out a little bit. And so I was very fortunate to get hooked up with the Commit Foundation. Well, in that process, I had a great coach. Her name was Miss Sandy, just an amazing lady, 72 years old. I like to call her, most interesting woman in the world. I think she could be on the Dos Equis commercial, because she's been a llama rancher and, lived all over the world.
Oh, wow.
Done some really cool stuff. But she really got me thinking about, kind of getting out of that checklist mentality into that structured discipline mentality that I have in the military, and think crazy, right? And she asked me, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I'm like, I race cars. And so she said, okay, let's go race cars. And I said, you're crazy. Like, that doesn't just happen. I'm nearly 50 years old. You don't go race cars if you're 50 years old. And so she got me thinking about it. She actually gave me the name of Operation Motorsport, and I didn't explore it when she said it. And then I just happened to be, tinkering around on social media, and I saw an Operation Motorsport, advertisement come up. And so I clicked on the link, and I met Tiffany and Diesel, who are actually from Canada. They live in Canada. The private org was actually started up there. Her husband Diesel was a 30 plus years, I think, in the Canadian Armed Forces, and a passionate motorsports guy. And they started the nonprofit out of Canada.
Wow.
And so, they're just some of the, again, I'm surrounded by people who just love the military, right? And just want to get back. And so they brought me on as a beneficiary, and I've been matched to Kevin Bohm Racing, who he is an incredible guy himself. He's a Honda R&D engineer up in Ohio, and also drives, a car and a professional in the SR Racing Series. And he's really good, by the way. And I've only done one race with them. I was in Sonoma, California a few weeks ago. We're heading back to Circuit of the Americas in Texas in a week. So next Wednesday, well, the 28th of April. I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously, this will be showed later. But on 20th of April, we'll be heading to Circuit of Americas out, and I am a crewman. That's my job. So, but
Nice.
absolute blast. I had an absolute blast. I had such a great time. And what an experience to fulfill a childhood dream of, working on a professional race team.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll get to drive the car from the pits to the inspection stand, right? And I could say I drove, a professional race car, but for now I'm enjoying the opportunity just to be on a team. And the first time out, we finished first and third.
Oh, wow.
So, not only do I get to go be a part of a pretty special team, but then to go out and actually win was really special. So, yeah, very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And last thing I'll ask you about here, Leadership Garage.
Yeah, another passion, kind of the culmination of all of that supervisory first sergeant time, a lot of experience in this arena with my business partner, Mike Lindley, who, like I mentioned, is also a retired first sergeant, 26 years in the military. We really started the YouTube series and the podcast as, hey, let's have some fun with this. We really enjoy talking. We meet every Sunday as a family. As families, we meet every Sunday, and we would find ourselves talking about this stuff every Sunday. We would have a great conversation about, something to do with leadership, followership, communications, team development, high performing organizations, culture, you name it. And so we said, why, let's take this, let's just record it and see what happens. And we didn't do it right away. It took a little time to learn the podcasting in and outs and, what video equipment and audio equipment and all that stuff you need. But even when we had that, it was, we kind of kicked the can down the road. And then one day we're just there on a Sunday and we just said, no more excuses, right? We're not excuse guys. And so we're just going to go up and do it. We just did, right?
Yeah.
We literally went up, we did the intro, 15 to 20 minutes. And we didn't do a whole lot of editing on that. We just went up and said what we wanted to say and introduce ourselves. And
it was good.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it really wasn't very good, but I really appreciate it.
I was I watched it. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
None of them been really good, but we're getting in a groove, right? We're really starting to figure out, like I mentioned, I think, and you and I were talking before we got on here, I don't think a lot of people realize is you invest a lot of time to do these. Even, right now you're doing one a week. I don't know how you're doing that. We're doing ours every 2-ish weeks.
It's brutal.
Right?
It's brutal.
Given the circumstances, but it does take a lot of time to make them really value added, right? Yeah. And we're still not there. Neither one of us have had the time, right? Between he also works 3 jobs. If you include Leadership Garage, he's a realtor and he works for the city. Yeah. And I'm working, basically 3 jobs as well. So, and that's not an excuse. We're going to get better with this, but it's just been us learning, right? Us learning what that really looks like. And so that's how it started. But we really realized pretty quickly that we just love it. We really do love being in this space. And we know how beneficial it can be for organizations, for people in their personal and professional development. And so we really want to make this more structured. And so we're, every weekend now, not only are we kind of developing what the podcast or the YouTube series looks like, but we're working through curriculum and what that might look like if we do leader development, but also what we're calling, a culture-wise, our culture revolution. We're still working on what that looks like, but it will be culture, leader development, and then speaking engagements and, through the voice, right? Whether that's the podcast, YouTube series, or we get a call to go do a talk somewhere. So those are kind of our 3 pillars that we're working on. We're also writing a book. So we spend a little bit of time every week formulating what that might look like. That's going to be called Full Service Self-Service. So that's full service serving others, and then self-service, making sure that you're taking care of yourself in the process. Kind of goes with the Leadership Garage theme as well.
I like that.
We're developing, trying to keep it in the theme. And then we're also developing a phone app. And so we're in the early stages of development there. We've got some movement on it and hope to have something out either, middle to fall this year with the phone app. We're really excited about the phone app. I think it ties in perfectly what we're trying to do with culture. It really gives us something we can work with. And it's perfect for today's digital age too.
Oh, yeah.
there's so much going on. So we're really working
Yeah.
on time, but we're super excited about it. We really are.
I was like, keep us posted on everything from the book to the episodes to the app, and we will definitely promote them here on our Instagram page. And the link to Leadership Garage will be in the episode description for this as well. So if you're listening to it, just click on the description. You'll be able to see that. And final question for you.
Yeah.
50 years from now, people mention your name. You got
Yeah.
your fingerprint on the Air Force, Space Force. What do you want people to say about you?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with Air Force or Space Force, to be honest with you. I want them to know, I want people to say that he genuinely cared about people, right? That
Yeah.
he poured into people with everything he had. He would give the shirt off his back for folks. And I try to live every day. It was kind of we talk about PDGU in that second
Yeah.
episode, and the G is giving. Mike and I are all about giving. That's what we try to do every day, right? Is what can we give back? What, even if it's just words, who can we call to uplift, today? Who can we pray for, right?
Yeah.
It's something that's who we are, right? We didn't necessarily have that when we were kids. And again, our parents loved us. It just, under the circumstances, and so we've really vowed to give back as much as we can. But we want it to be, it's the podcast and YouTube series are fantastic, right? And if it reaches people and makes a difference, that's awesome. But it's really about pouring into relationships and being more than just digital, right? More than just something you listen to on the way to work or you watch on a computer. We want to make a difference in people's lives. And so and honestly, if it's just my family, I hope it's more, but if it's just my family that says, he was a good dad, right? He was a good husband. He was a good poppy. He made a difference, and he showed us what right looks like, and he poured into investing in us, and it made a difference in our lives. Then I'm good, right? If that's what the obituary reads, then I'm perfectly fine with that.
That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule. All the amazing things that you've talked about that you're doing, we're going to have those in the episode description to this episode. Folks, that is all the time we have for this episode of the Shadows Podcast.